I wanted to talk today a little bit about this week's portion by Yigash. And for anyone can everyone hear me, by the way? Is everyone hearing me all right? Okay, good. So anyone who's spent time with the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, knows that this section is a little different in its texture, a bit more nuanced, a bit more internal. It gives us so much of the characters and their feelings and their thoughts, and it holds them in such a beautiful way that reflects the interests of more than just one party at a time. And I think that's really a unique thing about this week's portion by Yigash. I wanted to bring a little bit of a taste of that. So, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind bringing the text up. So, the text that I wanted to share, it's just an example of the way that we see sort of the interior of both Judah and Joseph in their encounter. And in a sense, it's a situation where we might we might feel more compassion for one than the other, but still we get really a sense of both of their griefs. So this is Judah speaking to who he thinks of as the viceroy, but who is actually his brother Joseph in disguise, or disguised to him. And he's explaining why it is that he can't possibly return without his brother Benjamin, because he has promised to bring Benjamin back to his father. So he says, "Now, if I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, since his own life is so bound up with his," and by the way, in the Hebrew, it's so beautiful. It says, "Benafsho kishura benafsho." His soul is tied up with his soul, like their souls are bound up together. When he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die, and your servant will send the white head of his servant, his father, down to Sheol in grief. Therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave. Let me remain as a slave instead of the boy, instead of Benjamin. And let the boy go back to his brothers. For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be a witness to the woe that would overtake my father. And at this, Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone withdraw from me." So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And his sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear. And so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. So I just wanted to bring this little keta, this little piece from the story, because we see both the interiority of Judah, what he's thinking and feeling, the grief that he's bearing, the guilt that he's bearing. And we also see the interior of Joseph. And we know already his pain. And it really struck me that this is such a beautiful thing, because it is so difficult to hold more than one pain. It is difficult to hold one pain. To hold the pain of more than one person, especially when they are in conflict, is such a challenge for us. And to be able to recognize both is such a challenge. So I wanted today to work a little bit with this idea of being able to hold two sensitivities at the same time in our meditation. So I'd like to ask you to come to a sit in a comfortable and supported position. If you're sitting down with your feet on the ground, make sure that they're nicely planted and that they're supporting your body. That your back is erect, your head floating towards the ceiling. And just turn your attention inward. just noticing your breath as it drops into your body. Settling into whatever is there. You may find it supportive to take a deep breath and release. Now I'm going to invite you to take your fingers, your fingertips, and just touch your fingertips to each other. Your fingertips are so sensitive. Notice that by touching your fingertips together, you're both touching and being touched at the same time. Allow yourself to explore first the sensation in one hand, perhaps it's your right hand if you're right-handed. What does it feel like to touch with your right hand? And then allowing that attention to shift to your left hand. Placing the awareness there. Then expanding your awareness to both hands. The sensation of touching and being touched, held together. Now, if you like, you can press your hands together, palm to palm. Again, allowing your awareness to encompass both the sensation of being touched and the sensation of touching. Now, if you like, just try folding your hands together so that one hand rests in the support of the other hand. You are supporting and you are supported at the same time. Breathing into the awareness of both of these sensations. And if you like, you might try alternating so that now the supporting hand becomes the supported hand. And the hand that was lifted before is lifting. And yet you are able to hold both hands fully in your awareness. The sensation of their touching, the sensation of their being touched. Each breath renewing that awareness. And you may wish to try placing one hand over the back of the other hand. As if comforting and protecting it. Feeling the warmth of that hand, but also the support from below. fully awake and sensitive to what is there for each hand. And you may try reversing that gesture so that now the comforted becomes the comforter and the supported becomes the supporter. Just allowing yourself to be present with the sensations of both. And before closing this sit, I invite you to rest your hands on your thighs or your knees, noticing that even here in this fairly standard posture, we are both touching and being touched. Opening ourselves with compassion to that which is there, both giving and receiving. And if you like, you can use this remaining time to return your attention to your breath. And when it is time to conclude, I will sound a bell.
Thank you, Heather. That beautiful teaching and practice. Friends, at this time, let's turn to Kadisha Tom, to Mourner's Kaddish. Please write in the chat the names of anyone you're thinking of today. I want to say again that today's sit is sponsored by Julie Cole in memory of her brother, Frank Abramson. And Julie writes, I love my brother and miss him very much. Our hearts are with you, Julie, and with all of you who are in mourning. If you're in a period of mourning, if you're marking a yahrzeit, the anniversary of a death, or if it's your custom to stand with the mourners, I invite you to unmute and to rise in body or in spirit. And the words of Kaddish are up on the screen. And I invite the community in support to respond. Yit gadal,
Ashtamir Rabba, Amen.
Yote, Yamlich Machote, Chayachon, Yamechon, Chayet Israel, Gala Bismakali, Rabba Mivahar, Maya, Gala Vietnamse, Tada, Halel Vietala, Bishakriach, Ko Kriachata, Chatavayachamaita, Lam Yama, Yibru Amen. Rabba Bin Shemaya, V'chaim Alenu, El Yibru Amen. Shalom Alenu, Ve'ol Kol Yisrael, Ve'ol Kol Yishvei Tevel, V'yimru Amen.
Shalom,
Amen.
Kuya Aseh Shalom, Aleinu Vel Kol Yisrael, Vel Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Yimeru Amen.
Amen.
May their memories be a blessing, and may all those who are in mourning be held in loving support and comfort. If you need to leave at this point, I wish you such blessing. Thank you for being here. For those who are able to stay, we have about 15 minutes for conversation and questions with Heather. You're invited to put any questions in the chat with a nice bold question sticking out. Maybe I'll begin, Heather, by first thanking you for that very embodied way of exploring that physicality and sense and sensation of feeling two things at the same time. And I wonder if you can say a little bit about just your relationship with the physicality that moves from the kind of skin, muscle, body into the place of awareness.
So I think the first thing I would say is the most important part of my relationship with that physicality is that I live in a body. We all live in a body, right? Um, and sometimes we live with this myth that the body and the spirit or the mind are separate. But I'm sure, just like everyone else, I have not met someone where the body lives separately. I've never encountered disembodied. Perhaps such a thing exists, but I haven't encountered it. Um, so, um, so for me, that's an important piece. I think it's also been really important to me because uh, this time has been a lot of intense thinking. There's been a lot to think about. Um, and there have been a lot of interior conversations. I'm sure people know what I'm talking about, those conversations with the people who are not in the room. Um, And so bringing myself back into my body has been really important to just be able to slow and center. Um, Also, I find that personally, I find that frequently there is something about being able to practice something in a concrete, physical way, and then bring it into our emotional intelligence and our spiritual intelligence um, that can be very helpful.
Beautiful. As I was experiencing it, I was noticing you had us, I had one hand folded. No, first I had it this way, resting. And I was noticing a few really interesting details that you didn't prompt, but I was noticing in myself. And the first one was I could choose to either kind of grip at the elbows so that my hands were holding each other, even though one was on top of the other,
Yeah,
or I could release more in the top hand, grip a little more in the lower hand, and that enabled a totally different sense of supporting and relaxing and releasing. And that was one thing that I found really striking. And the
yes,
other thing, maybe I'll just share the second thing and hear what your comments are. Um, you guided us to begin like this, and then you offered the invitation to turn the hand upside down. And just in that gesture, it flooded into my body a very different emotional quality.
yeah,
This felt so much more vulnerable for this hand,
yeah,
tender, and this hand didn't feel like it was like working as hard in a certain way to hold, but supported with a very different kind of tender softness. And first of all, I just want to thank you for that. That I wouldn't have discovered that if you had said, "Now feel this, now think about this." But
yeah,
the brilliance of the practice that you offered, we we each have a different body and a different relationship between our physicality and what it brings to our emotional experience and our awareness. So I first just want to thank you for that. And I want to see if there's anything that you want to say about those different gestures and qualities.
right. So I think you're right that gestures. I mean, they can also also can have a cultural overlay, but I think there are certain gestures that are fairly universal as far as the way we experience and them of being either more vulnerable. I mean, there is a certain reality of our bodies having certain vulnerabilities, right? That that's universal as humans. But I want to say something about the first part, which um, it's always a balance how much you want to guide and how much you want people to guide themselves in a meditation. But that practice of seeing just um, how lightly you can touch or how little you can give and still be supporting. Um, that's a lovely practice, and I've seen it in some somatic a yoga practice. But it's also, if anyone who has done Alexander technique, it's something that comes up there too. Frequently, we're using our bodies with so much more pressure than we need. Uh, and I think that's also a really wonderful metaphor for our relationship with others. Frequently, what it takes to give support or intervention may be a much more gentle pressure than we think we need to exert. And
Beautiful.
frequently that can be more effective, really.
Mhm. It brings to mind for me that when we say a prayer for healing or we extend comfort to those who are mourning, we always extend to the individual and personal and then say, among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, or among all those who are ill, among the Jewish people, or in the human family. So that also brings to mind for me the centering in our direct experience and the gathering in that maybe doesn't have to be that sort of exertion of holding others, but including them.
That's the nature of human compassion,
Mm.
right? I think that it's an important thing for us to be able to hold right now is the knowledge that the nature of human compassion is to radiate out from the specific, right? We learn compassion from our direct relations with others, our direct compassionate relations, our relationships usually starting with our close family, right? And it's only from that that we're able to broaden out and really be compassionate in a true way, right?
Mm.
I don't know if there's questions because I see
There
some.
are, yes. So I'm going to share. Um, I'm wondering, this is from Noah. I'm wondering if you could discuss this specifically the tips of the fingers touching. It seems very neurobiologically driven.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. As for me, I immediately slipped into a meditative state. It was like a gateway.
Oh,
And
lovely.
somebody else asked, let me just scroll up, about right and left.
Hmm.
Where was that question? From Moshe. In an earlier practice, you introduced awareness of liminal space. It feels like bringing our physicality into focus with the supporting of right and left. What do you think? So maybe, I know they're different, but maybe if there's something that you can say about right and left and fingertips.
Right. So fingertips are super sensitive. I mean, we don't think about it most of the time, but actually that word gateway is exactly it. They're like a sensory gateway for us. If you think even, just think of like rummaging through a bag when you can't see in it and the way that you use your fingertips. Anyone who lives in a cold climate like I do and has had the experience of rummaging through a bag when your fingertips are covered with gloves and how much more difficult it is to find things, right? Um, but I do think it is helpful to start with that because they're so sensitive that it kind of, you don't have to wake them up. They're already sort of awake, right? Um, and the balancing left and right, for sure, I mean, most of us, we are either left handed or right handed, and we tend to be much more aware of one side than the other. And I think, especially as we age, it's really helpful to keep that non-dominant side, sort of give it the full awareness. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
That's helpful. That's great. There was a question about the connection to the Parsha.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were teaching about the different emotions of Judah and Joseph, the different experiences, the reader is there holding them both.
Yeah.
But I think you were also teaching something very important about when we're in a moment of tension or conflict, um, what enables us to move from the kind of the very contracting experience of being only in our own pain or fear, and what helps us reach to the other person's experience, to hold to hold awareness of what they might be going through
Yeah.
along with our own experience. Could you talk about that?
So that is a really challenging thing. I think that what helps me is to be able to say, I'm okay right now. Like, I'm safe right now, right? And that's hard right now because I think for a lot of us, we don't feel so safe right now, right? But if we can say, in this moment, I'm safe enough to listen, right? It's safe for me to be able to listen right now. That I think um, is a big part of it, because the impulse to protect ourselves, it's natural, right? It's there for a reason, but it's easy for it also to become overactive, especially in situations where we feel threatened.
Indeed. It is so challenging. It's such a, I also notice in myself, when I'm in a moment of tension or conflict with someone, and I have the thought, can you feel into what they're feeling? There's a part of me right away that says, I don't want to, that very human, like I am identifying and attached to my pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if there's anything that you want to say in our last minute about the commitment or the kavanah, the intention of opening to somebody else's pain or concerns to the extent that we're able to.
I think it's just important to remember that opening to someone else's pain doesn't mean that you have to negate your own. Right? That the reality of someone else's pain doesn't mean your pain is any less, right?
Yes. What a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much, Heather, for your guidance and your teaching. Thank you, Jordan, for your tech support. And thank you to each and every one of you for being here, for enabling us to support each other in practice. Many blessings to each of you.
Thank you.
Until the next.
Lovely to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.